And we are live. Hello, welcome back to another review of Game of Thrones. I'm Chris Garner, joined once again with Tate the Hour, here to give our review on Game of Thrones Season 7, Episode 2, Stormborn. Before we get into our review, be sure to comment as we go through the episode today. Let us know what you thought of the episode, your speculation for the rest of the series. And before we go into our review, I do want to give a quick correction to something that we brought up last week regarding Samwell Tarly and Old Town and the Maesters there. So last week we said that when he gets there in season 6, the Citadel ask him about the death of the Lord Commander of Jon Snow, and we thought that Sam was aware that Jon Snow had died, and for some reason he didn't mention it, and they don't have it down on their records. So a commenter, Richie Rich from last week, messaged us and said that we were completely mistaken. Sam didn't have any knowledge of Jon's death. He wrote, Sam didn't know that Jon had died. That wasn't a plot hole. The guy at the Citadel thought that Aemon was still alive, so why would he know anything that had transpired since? When the guy said someone else was listed as Lord Commander, Sam said a lot has happened. It was implied he was referring to Lord Mormont's death and Jon's election, and not the death of Jon Snow himself. So that's
another correction from me personally. It wasn't series 3 when the Hound visited the house where the people were left for winter. That was series 4, episode 3.
Yeah. Few corrections. We do know our Game of Thrones stuff, though, I promise, guys. So, we're going to go right into what we thought of this episode, rough thoughts, and then, as always, our structure for these episodes is that we work our way from the northest part of the map of Westeros to the bottom. So we usually start off with Beyond the Wall, or in this case this week, Winterfell, and go to the bottom like King's Landing or Old Town, whatever happens to be.
Yes.
So, Tate, your overall thoughts on Episode 2, Season 7 of Game of Thrones?
There is a lot of people complaining online at the moment about this episode not having enough action, it being reasonably boring until the very end. However, I think this is probably one of the most exciting setup episodes we've had so far in the show. The good thing about Game of Thrones is you do sometimes get those amazing spectacle episodes towards the end of the episode, like series such as Battle of Blackwater. You get episodes like Baelor, you get episodes like Battle of the Bastards, Winds of Winter, and so on and so forth towards the end of the series. At the start of the series, you usually have one episode which will set up a lot from the series to come. It's usually episode 2 or 3, because episode 1 is dealing with the aftermath of the previous season. The next episode on from that will lay the groundwork for the next series. And this was that episode. Maybe coming one episode earlier than previous series. I love the fact that in episodes like this, you can build up tension from absolutely nowhere and maintain that tension throughout the entire episode. I've always thought that Game of Thrones is mostly fought through the words spoken in between kind of the little houses that are kind of controlling Westeros and the different areas of it. And the conflicts within are always better than the conflicts against other houses. And it's always best to see people who are on the same side, but always squabbling and coming up with different ideas and thinking where the power should go, because you know that in the end, that may come back to bite them. And this episode was a perfect reflection of that. And I don't think people should complain as much about this episode, because this episode was truly brilliant in screenwriting.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I don't know if this is a case of the marketing of this particular series, because the trailers were very action heavy. Looked like we were going to get just massive action beginning to end, wall to wall, all 7 episodes. And maybe that's because we've been spoiled in previous series when we do have things, like you said, like Battle of the Bastards, which is almost cinematic worthy. It is almost like you're watching a film on the big screen. But we're forgetting that most of Game of Thrones, like if not 80-90% of the series, are these slow burn character political intrigue moments, and that's the stuff of Game of Thrones that I like the most as well. I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was a great building episode from the first one. I think overall we enjoyed episode 1, didn't we? I think George and you said that it was a bit slow, but it was necessary because it was episode 1. This felt like, it's getting to that point which we'll reach at episode 6, episode 7, whichever episode where all the action's going to kick off, because I don't know the structure now. Now it's only 7 episodes.
Actually, complete spoiler for anyone watching. I know this is a spoiler-heavy filled one, but the actual trailer for next week's episode shows Tyrion's grand plan coming into place and the possible siege and sacking of Castle Rock. So that's coming through. I thought that was going to be towards the end of the series, but obviously that is going to be coming through in episode 3 at what we would say the midpoint of the series was.
My negatives with this episode, and I don't have many, really stem from the fact that maybe this is down to the fact that they've stripped it down to 7 episodes. They have essentially cut out, apart from the Ed Sheeran scene in episode 1, they've mostly cut out all the fat out of Game of Thrones now for a very streamlined viewing experience, getting from A to B to C as quick as you can. And usually I wouldn't have a problem with that, but to me with this episode, and this has happened in Game of Thrones before, but the geographical jumps and span in time felt like it had really been shrunk down, and it didn't make much sense. Like, characters will be traveling from the northest point of the map and then suddenly end up at the southernmost point of the map within like a scene or a couple of scenes, which would usually take them months. And it doesn't really make sense in the timeline because some events seem like they're taking place right after events that we saw last week in the episode, so it's happening immediately after. And then some things, traveling times would require months, maybe, you know, like close to a year to get there. And I've noticed that more in this episode because there's a bunch of characters traveling to different places now, and it looks like that's going to carry on into episode 3 as well. They're really my only negatives.
Yeah. Well, when we were talking about this beforehand, we were thinking to ourselves, okay, so this series is 7 episodes. And it's one of those where when we saw it was going to be 7 episodes, I think we both sighed and we thought, well, there goes all of the filler episodes. And sometimes a filler episode is needed. I mean, in the last series, there was 2 or 3 episodes which were a bit more like filler episodes. Nothing really happened, but the tension stayed quite high. And it kind of lulled you into false insecurity, just kind of like keeping you on that edge. And then the next episode, they would take you over the edge, and that's where it would drop. But they were needed. I feel like this series might suffer from tension, like not having enough of it. And I know we're going to talk about this when we go to Dragonstone and we talk about the Euron attack at the end of the episode. But let's be honest here, if that was going to happen in a 10-episode series, that would happen episode 3 or episode 4.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's been too quick between him saying, I'm going to go get you a prize, and then suddenly turning up somewhere between Dragonstone, which is where the party left this episode, and him meeting from King's Landing. It's too quick.
Yeah.
And maybe that's going to take away from the tension, because I thought they would be traveling, and it was where they were traveling past King's Landing, which would be where they would be in trouble. Maybe seeing them on the ship kind of settled in and then having them attack the next episode. That would make more sense instead of sending them off in one episode. Not only that, but towards the end of the episode, then having them attacked within 10 minutes later. It doesn't sit right.
It's anyway, really just the time scale that threw me off with this episode. But yeah, we'll get to the main nitty-gritty of the review now. So we'll start off at Winterfell. There's no beyond the wall stuff this one. There's no scenes at the wall. So we're jumping straight in at Winterfell, continuing on from the political debates of Jon Snow and Sansa. Jon Snow receives a raven from Dragonstone from Daenerys, summoning him there to talk of a truce and to talk of terms. And this doesn't sit right with Sansa or indeed most of the northern houses and families there. They brought up loads of events. And this is one thing I did really like about the episode as well. This felt like it was tying more back to like plot threads and things that happened in season 1, which I really liked. It seems like it's getting to that stage where it's coming full circle now. But they referred to things like, you know, Ned Stark left and was killed. Robb Stark left the North where he was, you know, he was at his strongest and he was killed. And they don't want to see the same happen to Jon Snow, although he was already killed and come back. So I don't know how many times you're allowed to do that. I liked that turmoil, though, and I thought that we're seeing that. We talked about this in episode 1, where we're seeing that constant power struggle now between Sansa and Jon Snow. We're seeing differences emerge. Littlefinger's always in the background, so you can tell that he is still very much the puppet master of Sansa, even though she thinks that she might be becoming more independent now and mindful of her own thoughts. What did you think to the Winterfell stuff today?
The Winterfell stuff was intriguing. I feel like it's the right decision for Jon to go south, and I completely agree with him saying a king must meet a queen, because if it was anyone else, they would be refused on the doorstep. It would be a waste of time. At the same time, I understand where people have quarrels with it. But I'm still concerned that Sansa is defying Jon in public. I know that I said last episode that maybe that is kind of the kind of politics that she's learned from Cersei and what she has kind of gained from living in the capital. But at the same time, like, now she is in control of Winterfell. She's in control of the North. She has had that put on her. I still think she's manipulating Littlefinger, and Littlefinger isn't manipulating her at this stage. I think she's learned too much from Cersei and learned too much from the capital and learned too much from Ramsay. And I think because we've already said this series that she admires Cersei and she is a bit too much like Cersei at the moment, I think she's the one playing Littlefinger. And I think a lot of people have been speculating online. I'm pretty sure Littlefinger's dead this series. It spells the end for Littlefinger. As soon as Arya makes it to Winterfell, that'll be his end. But I think Sansa will help to that cause. I think there's going to be a parallel to Series 1 where Littlefinger betrays Ned Stark. I think Sansa is going to do exactly the same. She's going to put herself in a situation where she can kind of have him arrested under reasonable cause. Arya will come in with the evidence that she was there, that Littlefinger was the one who sent Ned down and basically condemned him to death. And in that situation, that'll be the cause for Littlefinger's death. I think he'll die in the same way as Ned Stark as well.
See, I can't remember. I was trying to think back to Arya's list of people that she wanted to kill. Was Peter Baelish on that list?
No, he was not.
I don't know if you knew
I can check it out for you.
I'll talk a bit about Littlefinger then. So anyone who's watched this show before, any of our reviews on Game of Thrones, know that Littlefinger is my favorite character in Game of Thrones. I love how deceitful he is, I love how cunning he is, and I love how he's always like 100 steps ahead of everyone. It was a little bit shaky in season 6, but I think that was still ultimately part of his plan. What I'm hoping for in this series with Littlefinger is, and I have heard rumors that Littlefinger will die in this episode as well. I really hope they're not true. But I think that this is ultimately what he wants. He knows that once Jon Snow's out of the way, Sansa will technically hold the North, but really he's going to have all the power. There's still that, there's still that what's the word I'm looking for? There's still that tension between the two, but they still have that mutual respect for each other. It's kind of like the new Varys and Littlefinger combination in the North now. And you talked about that Sansa's had all this practice with Cersei and being in the capital, things like that. Let us not forget that Littlefinger's been in the capital a hell of a lot longer than Sansa was. He's been there through all that political intrigue with Cersei, alongside Varys as well. He's been playing Varys at his own game in the first series of Game of Thrones. He's had a lot more experience with this thing. He's worked his way up from, what was it, godforsaken spit of land called the Fingers, to being on the small council ultimately, and now onto many other ventures. I think he's still got lots of plans, and I think that he's still going to be trying to vie for that marriage or partnership with Sansa so that he can hold dominion of the North, because he keeps bringing up that Jon Snow's illegitimate. He doesn't know the whole Rhaegar Targaryen thing. And I think that if he gets into Sansa's head, and I think that doubt is already in her mind now, and she's seeing that Jon Snow might not be the kind of leader that she wants for Winterfell, and she could argue her case that she is actually the leader of Winterfell. I think Littlefinger's going to have a big part to play in that. I think he might bring in the Lords of the Vale as well, because he technically has, I think he has the biggest military command out of any of the houses at the North there.
Unless Bran comes in and just reads off a tree and ruins it all.
Yeah, there was no Bran this episode, was there? We haven't seen Bran in a long time.
We'll see him next episode. I reckon he'll arrive the same day that Arya arrives at Winterfell.
But in short, no, I think that Littlefinger definitely has a bigger plan. I really hope he doesn't die, but as soon as Arya started to make her way up to Winterfell, I thought there's a chance there. But I just don't want it to be true, because I love Littlefinger.
We have another harking back to Series 1, in the crypt.
That's what I was going to
that are taking place. Jon is in the crypt, kind of saying his goodbyes before he goes off down south. And Littlefinger comes up and he starts talking to Jon. Jon is not too happy that he's there. And Littlefinger asks for a thank you. And it's a moment where Jon loses his cool. And it shows because in series 1, Ned had his hands around Littlefinger. He put him up against the wall, strangling him. In exactly the same kind of scene mirrored. Once again, Jon strangles Littlefinger, and I mean, it didn't end up well for Ned.
No, it didn't. And if you ask me to choose who do I want to see live more, Jon Snow or Littlefinger, I'm going to answer Littlefinger any day of the week. Like, I love Littlefinger, and again, he's done this for a purpose. He's done this to stir the pot. He wouldn't do this unknowingly. He did have that really very similar moment in series 2 with Cersei, where he called her out on the whole incest thing. And all the soldiers on him immediately. And although that was a great scene, and I do love the scenes like that, I don't like them because to me, maybe it's me going off book Peter Baelish, but he wouldn't do anything like that that would put his life in harm's way. But this was another one of those moments like that. And I love how he said that, I loved your mom. And then he brought up the whole thing like, oh, she didn't like you, did she? Like how wrong she's become. He's trying to suck up to it. Love the things like that. And then he just throws that in there like, and I love your sister as well, Sansa. And that is the thing that makes him snap. Littlefinger, to me, wouldn't have done that without a reason. And, even with that in mind, Jon Snow still has to leave. I think this is a lot of setup for what's going to happen with Littlefinger in the North. And this is one of the storylines. It's probably my favorite storyline going on at the minute with the potential of where it can go. And I'm completely clueless now as to where it can go. I've said this many times. It's gone completely past the books now. It's doing its own thing. Which puts me, as a person who has read the books, in a very interesting spot because I'm with everyone else now. I don't know what's happening with this thing.
Shall we move on to the Riverlands?
Yes, let's do it.
So, in the Riverlands, we have the return of one of the gang, shall we say. We still don't have Gendry back, but we do have everyone's favourite Hot Pie still making pies in the pub that he was left in. And Hot Pie hasn't really changed as a person. He's still quite jolly. He's still quite happy. Still calls Arya Ari. But at the same time, Arya has changed so much that she is a shell of a person who she previously was. And I'd say that this was acted quite well by Maisie Williams, because at the start of the scene, it's very casual. Oh, hello, Hot Pie. Not really kind of caring at all. And I'm sure Hot Pie wanted quite a kind of happy reunion, but it seemed like a very cold one to start off with. And they get talking, and she says she's going down to the capital. And Hot Pie says, I thought you'd be going back up north. Your brother's in charge over there. No mention of Sansa, who will probably be the first face she sees when she gets back up north. So she completely changed in that scene. Like her facial expression, her mood, her acting, kind of her mind, it completely changed. It was almost like she became a kid again. And it may be the first sign of kind of weakness that we've seen for Arya since she's become one of these assassin people. And the whole time she is like, I am no one. She's going with that mentality of like, I am no one, I'm a faceless assassin, stuff like that. And this is the first time that she becomes Arya Stark again for the first time in a very long time. I'd say since series 4. And it's quite a, I'd say, conflicting moment for her, especially when paralleled next to the next scene that Arya's in, where Nymeria returns with her pack of wolves, the dire wolf that she had to let go in episode 2 of series 1 because otherwise it would be killed. And yeah, it's kind of showing that Arya is a completely different person to who she was in series 1. She's a completely different person to who she was a season ago. And yet she's finally going home.
Yeah, I'm going back to like the whole Bravos thing with the faceless men, and I think last season we talked about that. We didn't really like how that whole storyline ended. Like she still has the power of the faceless men, but it didn't seem like she ultimately learnt anything at the end of that. That was one of the big problems I had. But you could argue that she still has that lack of identity. That's what she wanted ultimately. She wanted to be one of the faceless men who don't have an identity. But now there was that constant tension which brought her back home, that she is a Stark of Winterfell. She needs to return home. But there is still that change in the character. And I will say that I love how Maisie Williams played that, where she is opposite Hot Pie in the tavern. And you go back to whichever season it was where she left on the horse. I think it was season 3 with the Brotherhood Without Banners, and he gave her that little wolf-shaped bread. And I thought of how she played that scene alongside Hot Pie there, and it was a very sweet goodbye to that character. Here, she is just like haunted, vacant, emotionless.
It's from that cameo with Ed Sheeran. She's just...
God, that's how I felt after that cameo. But I like how Hot Pie... I loved seeing Hot Pie back as well, because he was one of my favorite characters. He was a really nice supporting character in Game of Thrones. But even, you can tell he's like, what happened to you? Like, you've changed. Like, what the hell happened? I love that stuff. I love how she played that, and I keep forgetting, like, what information do characters know? What are they aware of? I mean, we made a mistake of that last episode where we talked about the whole Lord Commander thing. I was completely unaware that Arya didn't know what had gone on with, you know, the Boltons, and that they'd ultimately been sacked and Jon Snow had won and taken command of Winterfell. Nymeria scene as well, going back to season 1. It was great seeing Nymeria back. I love that. I love how they set up that scene, how the wolves surround her, and then you have that great shot of Nymeria approaching her with a very bewildering last line, which you watched the, what is it, Inside Game of Thrones, the show that follows.
For some strange reason, the Game of Thrones official channel have not been posting up their Inside the episodes. They're listed as unlisted at the moment. I'm sure they'll come out at some point. However, there have been some YouTube channels which have been given access to that, and they've been uploading them separately. So we're still able to see the Inside the episodes if you search for them. And in this episode, they were saying that it parallels directly with an episode from Series 1. I believe it was Series 1. I can't remember which episode it was, but it's Ned Stark talking to Arya saying she's got to be a lady now. She's got to grow up. She's going to go and marry a noble lord. She is going to go and do all these amazing things and start up a family. And Arya turns around to Ned and just says, "That's not me." And it's meant to kind of show that she has changed as a person, and Nymeria now has their own life going on. And people change over time, especially when we think, well, the way I interpret it is Nymeria recognized Arya but did not recognize her as Arya. And that's why she left. Maybe we'll see a scene with Nymeria later on in the series where Nymeria comes back for Arya. Maybe the dream, one day we will see Nymeria being ridden like in Princess Mononoke. But who knows?
We'll get Gillian Anderson to provide the voice of Nymeria, just like the dub of Princess Mononoke. I'm wondering if you could, I mean, we haven't seen the rest of the season yet, so it'll be interesting when we do get to the last episode where we can go back and see these threads and themes that have been coursing through the series without our knowledge. Do we think that Nymeria turning down like that reunion with Arya has something to do with, because we thought that all the Starks are back together now, it's all going to be a big happy family, the Starks are at full power, the wolves will return, the pack is going to be back together. With a scene like this, although Arya's heading back home, we've got, you know, Jon Snow heading south now, they seem to all be breaking apart again, and I'm wondering if that has something, maybe it was just to do with Arya's identity, but I think maybe the whole wolf thing and not wanting to join them might have something to do with the power of the Starks might dip again and wane. I don't really know at the moment. That's just pure speculation. Should we go to Dragonstone then? We have a lot to talk about with this because most of the episode took place at Dragonstone. Yes.
So in Dragonstone, we start off the episode with a storm. The episode is called Stormborn, referring to Daenerys of her name. And we start off with Daenerys questioning Varys and Varys's whole plot to try and have Daenerys killed. And at that moment in time, Varys rightfully says he did not know Dany. He was unaware of her. He only knew of the brother because he was kind of the one who was labeling himself as going to be king. And it's a very tense scene with a very direct line of questioning. You said before the episode you don't think it was acted well by Emilia Clarke. I think it's one of her best acted scenes in the series, to be honest. Whether that means that it was her acting well or not is another thing to question entirely. But at the same time, very intense scene. It's probably the first time we've seen Varys almost on the back foot in the entire series of Game of Thrones. The only other time we saw him was when he fled the King's Landing after Tyrion went and killed his father. But at the same time, it's an interesting scene because it's the first big monologue of the series where we have Varys kind of stating why he thinks Daenerys will be the queen. And really, he's not in it for Daenerys, he's in it for the people, and he believes Daenerys is the right person for the people.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to Emilia Clarke first because she does kind of lead the first bit of this episode. I don't think this is one of her strongest acting moments, but then again, if you ask me to compile a list of her strongest acted moments, I don't think I'd be able to complete a list of those. But it seems whenever she's trying to be like this tough character, she always kind of puts this stiff upper lip, kind of looks down her nose like this and talks in a very slow, monotone, Galadriel-like voice. And I just don't buy it. I don't buy her as this tough ruler at all, and I think that's all down to how Emilia Clarke plays it. However, and I can't remember, I've forgotten his name, but the guy who plays Varys has always been incredible, but he was great in this scene. And it was nice to see Varys get a good chunk of material to work with in this episode. Again, we go back to Series 1, bringing up plot elements of that. And I do like how Daenerys did bring up the whole Varys thing, because it seemed weird that she hadn't questioned this before. It seems like she's wanting to bring all people loyal to her and make sure that they're loyal so that none of the problems like what happened to the Mad King or any of the other monarchs that are going on in Game of Thrones at the moment happen to her. She wants a long dynasty rule. And I liked that. And we did see that moment of vulnerability in Varys, which are moments that we don't get very often in Game of Thrones. But again, he's been through this rodeo before. He words his way out of it. And, she says, like, if you do double cross me, you will be burnt. And you can tell that won't happen. But I like how he said that. It's probably one of the most empowered speeches I've seen in Game of Thrones, where he talks about his upbringing and how he was nothing. He was like a street urchin. He was mutilated. He's worked his way up. His loyalty is to the people and to the people alone. And he will do whatever means necessary to make sure that the people are held up there before anyone else. Yeah. That means changing allegiance and everything like that. And he said that he will continue to do. Well, he basically words it that he won't do that, but I think that the people's interests are always going to be at the forefront of his mind, and that was a really nice insight to his character. He talked about stuff like that before, but it was nice to get it laid out again this late in the game.
We then have an interesting scene, shall we say, where Melisandre arrives at Dragonstone, which I always thought was going to happen. It's going to be interesting what Jon will say when he arrives next episode to Melisandre. At the same time, she says in Valyrian, the prince that is promised, she believes that Daenerys has a part to play in it. Whether she is one of the princes to promise, or maybe she has something to play in there anyway. They say that it could also be the princess to promise, because prince in High Valyrian takes no gender. Which is true. I believe that is in the books, as far as translation is concerned. At the same time, I don't think Daenerys is the prince that is promised. I don't even think Jon is the prince that is promised. At the end of this episode, it could be Theon, it could be Jorah, it could really be anyone. It could even be Sam of all people. There are so many people who it could be. If I was to put betting on who the prince that was promised at the end of this episode was, it's going to be the Hound, it's going to be Theon, or it's going to be Jorah. Those are the three candidates. I think that the Hound, it doesn't have to be a prince, though. It just has to be a person reborn by fire, fitting all the things.
Right.
I think there are many people who it could be right now, but I don't think it's going to be the obvious people. That would be way too obvious, shall we say, for it to be Jon, who is literally being reborn, but he wasn't reborn within salt and smoke. He was just reborn. We have Daenerys, who was reborn in smoke, when in Series 1, end of Series 1, when she became the Mother of Dragons, but she hasn't been reborn in salt. In this episode, when we get to the Euron attack, Theon jumps ship, which is on fire, and jumps into the sea, which is salt. Fire and salt could be him. At the same time, the Hound has been reborn himself through religion, and yet at the same time, he is starting to overcome his fear of fire. If Beric Dondarrion dies and he gets given the flaming sword, he is Azor Ahai. It's going to be the Hound. There are so many people who it could be at this moment in time. it's very vague at this moment, but it won't be the obvious people.
I think it's going to be the Hound, because they've spoke about that before in Game of Thrones, that Thoros of Myr had a flaming sword that was talked about in series 1. I think it was brought up again in season 3. So there is groundwork there.
Beric Dondarrion.
Was it Beric Dondarrion that had the flame?
Yeah.
So I thought it was
Thoros of Myr is the one who lights the sword and stuff like that.
Yeah, my bad. I thought they said series 1 it was Thoros of Myr who was at like a jousting thing and had a flaming sword. I couldn't remember. I really hope that's the case. I don't want to see them go with the obvious choice, because one thing that I will say that I hate about Game of Thrones fans are the Game of Thrones fans that say they really want Jon and Dany to be an item.
No.
It's like the most fan fiction-y conclusion to a story there is.
They're related, so...
Well, you know, the Targaryens do always fit in the family, don't they?
Everyone in Game of Thrones loves a bit of family.
They do.
Everyone in Game of Thrones loves a bit of family.
Because it just seems like Game of Thrones fans, like the really narrow-minded ones, just go like, "Oh, Jon Snow's heart, oh, Daenerys' heart. I really want to see them together," and that just really makes my blood boil when I keep hearing stuff like that. I was surprised how quickly Melisandre did travel down from the wall, but then again, when I think about it, it was the season finale of season 6 where Jon Snow, once he learned that, burnt Shireen at the stake. That's when he banished her. So there was more of a distance there. So that was completely fine. I like that they're setting up that, but we need to remember as well that the series of books are called A Song of Ice and Fire. And when she talked about that prince and princess thing, the whole Jon Daenerys thing, Jon Snow, Daenerys, Fire, they already talked about this episode that the paths are going to cross because the White Walkers are vulnerable against fire. That's why we're getting that collaboration with him and Daenerys. So I think that still might very much tie into the title, but I don't know about the whole prince that was promised thing. I like that they're keeping that.
It's funny. They said that whoever Azor Ahai will be a character who was seen in episode 1, season 1. And that really does narrow down the candidates a lot. And if you think back, not only is Theon in series 1, episode 1, but so is the Hound. We do have obviously Jon Snow and Daenerys in series 1, episode 1 as well. But those characters are actually in there from the very, very, very start. So it really could be any of them. I believe Jorah is also in series 1, episode 1 as well, towards the end of it. So yeah, it could be any of them, which is brilliant.
What's amazing about this series so far is that for all intents and purposes, it almost feels like it's the final season of Game of Thrones, but I'm very aware that we've got a following season after this. So
if we have when we get down to the Jorah cure towards the end, if we have Sam burning off the dead flesh and then rubbing salt on it, that would be funny.
Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention this in the Winterfell thing, but while we're talking about the whole Daenerys thing and the unity between her and Jon Snow, I'll bring it up now. We talked about this in the last episode with Sam discovering in that book that Dragonstone is full of dragon glass.
Yes.
But Jon Snow has a great line when he's talking to the houses of the north, and he says, "We've recently discovered that Dragonstone has dragon glass." And I just went, who'd have thunk it? It'd be like the equivalent of Mickey Mouse hiding out at fucking Disneyland. Like, why did anyone think of this before?
Is Disneyland a place now on the Game of Thrones map? Just
yes, it should be. I don't know where it
winters of Winterfell, and if you're really feeling like a nice summer vacation, go to Disneyland. It's just off the coast of Dawn.
It's when Disney eventually buy out HBO, we'll get Game of Thrones World at Disneyland, and none of the kids will be allowed to go there because it will just be full of murder.
Does this mean that we're going to get Game of Thrones themed rides at Disneyland?
Oh my god, yeah, we're gonna have to compile a list of all the rides that we could make out of this show.
Does this make people like Daenerys and Cersei Disney princesses?
Yes, yes, it does. Wow, there's probably up. Yes, let's
moving swiftly on. We do get at the start of my episode, I got given a graphic violence, graphic language, graphic nudity, and I thought, hey, there's going to be a sex scene. And this is said sex scene. It is Grey Worm and Missandei, which is the tension has been there since they've met. Let's be honest here. It's a true love only between a eunuch and one of the most beautiful characters on Game of Thrones. I'm not talking about Varys. He is the same person. But
and the fan fiction writers begin again.
What, Varys and himself?
Varys and Grey. What? No, Varys a Grey Worm. God, you're sick. You're really sick.
But anyway, this scene, it was, I'd say, a nice scene to start off with. It was a scene talking about the fears that came with the Unsullied, and we haven't really had much of a backstory behind the Unsullied. We get a few little pockets here and there, but it's nice to finally hear a real account of what it's like, kind of not only in the training of the Unsullied, but at the same time, what they might fear in life. Like, probably the funniest line from the episode was, they make us do things we fear. If you fear dog, you sleep with dog. If you fear sea, we throw you in sea. If you drown, good. If you survive, good. Like, I was pissing myself after that line, I'm not gonna lie. But like, then he goes and says, like, you're the person who makes me weak. I was always the bravest, and it's probably what's going to be his downfall in the end, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's how Grey Worm is going to die. He's going to die in the hands of Missandei, or Missandei is going to be killed, and that's going to tip him over the edge, and he will be killed in the aftermath of it.
Yeah.
But it was a poignant scene, shall we say. It was one that was, sometimes Game of Thrones gets a bad rap for having sex for the point of sex, but this had a purpose. This actually had a purpose in the story, especially in the story of the characters themselves and what role they play for Daenerys, and having two of Daenerys' closest advisors kind of having that kind of relationship. I'm sure Daenerys kind of knows.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure she does, and I ship it.
Yeah, as does Sheila in the comments, apparently. This definitely filled Game of Thrones TNA quota for this season. I think it's been a while, and oh boy, was that TNA filled this episode. That's my really creepy comment out the way, and I'm moving on with the rest of the scene. Yeah, I thought it was nice because Game of Thrones, especially the first few seasons, and a lot of people that have got into the show who aren't, might be a bit prudes or whatever, but they don't approve of the sex scenes that were very constant, almost in every episode, every other scene in Game of Thrones, and a lot of the exposition was told through that. I think the Game of Thrones.
I feel like it was powered on by the fact that one of the main characters owns a brothel house.
Yes, absolutely.
Moved around that brothel house. Now he's out of the brothel house. Less sex and violence. Well, less sex.
Yeah, and they engineered the character of Roz, who was, a whore there, and then a lot of the dialogue and the exposition was told through her, so that made sense for the first two, although it was a bit on the nose. This one actually had, it had built to this moment. It had a lot of character behind it, and I thought both of them played the scene fairly well. I'm not too keen on the actress who plays Missandei. She seems very one note, but I think this was probably one of her better acted scenes. I like how Greyjoy was like putting the moves on her, like he was very much like Barry White. You're the first, my last, my everything. You're my weakness, which is a line that I may have to try at some point in my own personal life to see if that will go over as well as Grey Worm did in this episode. No, I thought it was fine, but the memes that have come out from this scene have been incredible. Now, I was very late watching this episode. Usually I watch it on the day that it goes up. I had to watch this earlier today because I watch it with my folks, and again, this scene was kind of awkward to watch. But there was one image that came out, and it was a Barbie doll and a Ken doll. And if anyone's been imaginative as a kid, you know exactly where I'm going with that. But that's basically all I have to say on the Grey Worm Missandei scene.
Moving on, let's move on to the Tyrion grand plan. This is the plan that we kind of guessed from the trailers. We're going to have the Sand Snakes and the Greyjoys. They're going to go south. They're going to grab all of the Dornish fleet, and they're going to lay siege to King's Landing. The right plan. Funnily enough, someone said that in the Riverlands conversation happening whilst Hot Pie and I were talking, there are some people in the background who are actually speculating on this, saying, do you really think that Daenerys has 3 dragons? And they say, if that's the case, we need to get to King's Landing quick, because then we'll get rich. Harking back to a scene said earlier on in the season in the background, not this season, earlier on, way, I can't remember which season it was, but saying the richest people on sieges are the thieves because they steal all the food at the start, they sell it all off during the siege, and then by the time the siege is over, win or loss, they are the richest people in town. So that's a nice little kind of bit right there. At the same time, yeah, I like this plan. Tyrion obviously has a good knowledge of the sewer systems in Castle Rock, being in charge of them. And I think that's how they're going to get in. They're going to open it from the inside through the sewage system. And we're going to see that next episode, the attack on Castle Rock. So first kind of big battle sequence of the series. I'd say the end of episode was less of a battle sequence and more of a slaughter. So yes, looking forward to that.
Yeah, and what I like about this was that this has been building with Tyrion before, because we've seen that he's a master of strategy when we go back to the Battle of Blackwater, where he kind of single-handedly led the charge for that entire thing and organized the entire operation, although we got no credit for it. And I don't know if this is related to the books, like they've introduced a little bit of it there. They didn't say it by name or anything like that, but in the books, I think it's from book 1, but definitely in A Dance with Dragons, the 5th book in the series, we're told that Tyrion is a great, I think it's called Savas. It's basically like the Game of Thrones equivalent of chess. And he's a master player at this. It's a game completely built on strategy and understanding the mind of the opposite person. And I think they're like military pieces. So you could argue that like the pieces on the board there, when he's arranging everything and what's going to attack what, could be a link to that. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
I just picked up on that as a book reader, but I thought it was great. I love how he basically just lays his plan out. No one has any questions about it, maybe except for Olenna, and they all just go with it. And we're going to see that plan come to fruition in the next episode, which I guess brings us to Olenna Tyrell, who is there with, oh God, what's her name? Ilaria Sand, I think her name is. Is that her name?
Yes.
Oberyn's paramour. This is the thing I had a problem with. There is no establishing shot for them arriving at Dragonstone. We just cut to a scene and they're there. That really didn't take me out of the episode, but I kind of went like, whoa, how did they get there? Like, how did they travel from Dawn to there within that time? That would have took ages. Again, though, I think that was at the end of season 6, so you could argue that the year difference kind of allows you narratively a bit of extra time in the middle. But just like a shot approaching Dragonstone or anything like to get there. I don't know how they knew that she'd arrived there. Did they send a raven? Did Varys know? Did he tell them that she was on her way there and she'd be here at such and such a date? Things like that, the geographical distance between places, that kind of irritates me a little bit. But one of the stupidest lines in Game of Thrones, and I don't think it was meant to be stupid, but because it was said by Olenna, and Dame Diana Rigg is a phenomenal actress and one of the best characters in Game of Thrones. She says not to listen to Tyrion, not to listen to anyone else except herself and her own judgment. And she says that everyone else is a sheep. You're not a sheep, are you? You're a dragon. Be a dragon. And then I'm going to do like that's what I was. She's going to like go, like around the room, like, and do that and pretend to be a dragon and take it literally. It was kind of it was one of those lines that's always on the nose, and it's very like written for TV line and doesn't really mesh with anything else. Maybe I'm being too nitpicky on that line, but I thought it was hilarious.
Here's the thing though, and I think Daenerys will probably become the Mad Queen off this. She's listened to Tyrion's advice, especially about like the Greyjoys and the Sand Snakes heading down to Dawn, and they were attacked immediately. That news will get back to her fast, especially if Theon has survived that attack. If Theon is able to get back to shore and back to tell Dany, I think she might start to listen to Olenna a bit more. And if that is the case, she will go for an all-out attack, and it will end badly for both sides, hence why we see a field on fire and stuff like that, with Jaime charging towards. I think they're going to lose that battle. I think it's going to be a close battle, but I think they're going to lose it. And I think that's because Dany is going to lose it, and she's going to listen to Olenna Tyrell over listening to Tyrion, who will obviously say, do not attack now. Now is definitely not the right time to attack now. They've mobilized the troops. This is the worst time to attack. Olenna will go, screw it. You're in charge. You take control of this one. And it's interesting because I feel like Olenna's already kind of been proved right by saying, don't listen to Tyrion, because Tyrion's first part of the plan has gone wrong. I think the sacking of Castle Rock will go right, and I think the Lannister soldiers will go to defend that, and they will probably lay siege to Castle Rock, and that's where the battle is going to take place. Jaime is going to be asked to go and recover Castle Rock. That's where the main battle is going to take place, with like Grey Worm and the Unsullied on the inside of Castle Rock, and them having to try and defend from the outside.
Or you could argue that maybe Elena's trying to throw Daenerys off a little bit, and maybe she's still vying for power with the Martells. I don't really know. They seem like they're genuine to the cause because they have gone on the ships and everything like that. But it did make me wonder when she first said that, but you're probably right with that. So let's talk about the biggest, arguably the biggest part of this. No, it was the biggest. Let's be honest. It was almost like a film watching this thing. And the reason that I wore my grey shirt today, I wear it with pride. The Greyjoy is one of my favorite houses in Game of Thrones. Euron's attack on the entire rest of the Greyjoy fleet, essentially, that were stationed at Dragonstone. We grouped this with Dragonstone because we don't exactly know which area, but we know that they live
somewhere between Dragonstone and King's Landing. We don't know exactly where.
Yes. This scene was incredible. It was genuine edge of the seat stuff, and I hate that line because it's so cliched and everything like that, but genuinely it was, because I like people on both sides. I think Euron's fantastic. Like when he was first introduced into Game of Thrones season 6, I didn't really know much about the actor, and I think this always is the case when you read the books, but my imagination of the character I much preferred in my own mind than to what I eventually saw on screen. But this season, he has just like made the character his own now, and he's definitely a force to be reckoned with in this series. But then again, I also really like Theon and Yara. However, there are a group of characters in amongst this scene that I don't care about, and 2 of them get killed, which was like the happiest day of my life watching Game of Thrones. The Martells, so Ilaria Sand and the 3 Sand Snakes were all on board. 2 of the Sand Snakes were killed in very, very gruesome ways, and it was fantastic.
I have to question: was Euron stabbed by either of them in any way, shape, or form? Do we see? I obviously didn't see it, so I'm assuming it didn't happen. But even the slightest scratch, that is poison. Their weapons are all poisoned.
I think the showrunners probably forgot about that. You know, I don't know. I'm gonna have to watch that scene again.
I don't think he got scratched, because they would have obviously shown a like a face, like a what's it called, a close up on that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if there was a scratch of any sort or anything like that, then
that's
it may come back to haunt, especially because it came back to haunt the mountain. Obviously, he took it a lot harder. But at the same time, I think next episode, the last remaining Sand Snake, I believe it's the youngest one. She'll be given the same treatment as the last remnants of the Sparrows, the sister, whatever her name is, the one who's being still tortured probably to this day.
Oh, Septurinella.
Septurinella, that's the one. I think she's going to end up in there. I feel like Ilaria Sand is dead straight away, will be executed immediately.
Yeah.
And I think Yara's going to actually live through this. I don't think Euron will kill her just yet, because even though he's got the Salt Throne, as far as genetics are concerned, he needs Theon. Theon is next in line to the throne, no matter what is said, even though he owns the Salt Throne. So he'll need to somehow draw Theon in, knowing that he's a coward. Coward, I say, he is sly, he is a survivor. He is not a coward. That was the best thing he could do in that situation.
I do... If that's the case, I do have a slight problem with the ending of this episode then. First off, I just want to geek out and just say that Euron's actual entrance into the battle is one of the coolest entrances of a character in films, TV, whatever it happens to be. One of those like rampart things that comes down, like the landing platform. He is riding that and it just crushes a guy and he's straight into the battle.
And then he pulls out his axe in the shape of a squid and you're just like, oh, shit.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. The weapon design in Game of Thrones is great, but that is my favorite weapon, hands down, in Game of Thrones now. Such a cool design. I love that. Also, George has left us notes on this episode. He really enjoyed it, and he said that he enjoyed the R-rated Pirates of the Caribbean segment. I now know what he means by this ending scene. What else? So the ending, if that is the case, if he did want to essentially wipe out the true line to the Salt Throne, he could have easily killed Yara and he could have easily dashed towards Theon, killed him, and his plan was complete. Which made me wonder when he said that he was going away to bring her back a gift. We all thought it was Tyrion. Will it be the Greyjoy still, or is that just for his own end?
No. The Greyjoy is for his own pleasure. He was always after the Sand Snakes, as the Sand Snakes were the ones who killed Cersei's daughter. It wasn't Tyrion in the end. He obviously suspected the plan, knowing that they'd united together, suspected they'd be going back at some point to gather their army. So he kind of called that out, intercepted them, and the Greyjoys are just kind of the plus on the side. That's for his own benefit. That's for his own pleasure. We've actually got a comment from Marco Minko, which I actually agree with. Tyene is going to get killed first in front of her mother. That's a good shout. In the trailer for the next episode, we see Euron being cheered throughout the streets and Tyene being dragged behind. And yeah, it could happen. I think that would be pretty evil and brutal, but I genuinely think Yara's going to survive through this one in some way or another.
Mm-hmm. That did actually break my heart, though, when Theon did jump off the ship, because I
was completely on board with it. Off board, shall we say, with it.
No, I was too, but in that moment, and I think it was again, I don't know the actress's name, the one who plays Yara. Her expression of complete just like horror and disappointment in Theon, and genuine sadness. I like how they played it as well when he was seeing the brutality on deck. This was something that reminded me of Blackwater when the Hound went into the fray, into the battle, and he was seeing people on fire, and it messed with his mind, and he had to retreat. It reminds me of that with Theon, where you can see glimpses of Reek still trying to come through. He isn't quite there at Theon Greyjoy level yet.
I'm going to say it's a bit of Reek, but it's also him thinking. It's him thinking, weighing up the options. And it's not like he's not been really in a similar situation to this before. He's never had someone hostage in front of him. He has been almost the hostage in that situation, and help has kind of left him. I'm going to say that he jumped overboard thinking that was the best option. If he took another step forward, then Yara dead. And not only that, but he would be next. It was pretty certain that he was going to be immediately killed. Yeah. At the same time, he knows how Euron works. Euron is a savage. He is a person who won't just kill someone. He'll kill someone in front of them to make a point. And he's not going to go and kill Yara without Theon or one of the Iron Islanders seeing it. And seeing as Theon is the main Iron Islander left who opposes him, he will make sure that Theon sees Yara killed. Because Theon jumped, it takes that power away from him. Therefore, he won't kill Yara until Theon sees her again. Theon jumping off ship was not only the best option, but it shows that he's going to survive for another day. And it means he's going to be able to report back to Daenerys, and it means they're going to be able to adapt to the situation instead of there being no survivors, no one getting back. There'll be a catalog of the events.
If he does meet Yara again, you know it's going to be like really horrible. Like she's not going to trust him or anything. But there's definitely bigger plans with Theon, and I can't wait to see what they are. I did put in the comments earlier as a kind of joke, but it would be kind of nice to see it pan out that way. Maybe he's going to bump into Gendry and his rowboat, so he's got a means of transportation in the middle of the ocean. But let's hope that Gendry is far away from Dragonstone, because if he's still there, and he has been for all these years, however long it's been, he is the worst salesman that I actually, not salesman, like he's not selling anything. You know what I mean? Whatever the word is for someone who boats. I'm very tired right now. Let's move to King's Landing, though. So very, very interesting.
I was going to say something very quickly, Wesley. Sorry, just typing into the comments. Keeping on to... Wow, I can't even type anymore. I just wrote dragons.
I will get to the typing and talk.
Anyway, so... I've lost my train of thought because I was looking at the comments. Chris, help
Should we
me.
just move to King's Landing? Let's go to King's Landing.
Let's move to King's Landing.
The safest place on Earth.
No, definitely not. Cersei has rallied the Tyrell bannermen, saying, the Tyrells have now sided with these savages. They are taking our gerbs. They're taking all of our lives. They took their gerbs. But Randall Tully is questioning it, because he's questioning the fact that they've got 3 dragons. And he's always been a bannerman for the Tyrells through thick and thin. And Jaime confronts him afterwards and says, look, like, we need you to be the commander-in-chief. I really think that you would be the one to kind of help us through this. And Lord Tarly turns around to him and says, I'm not a backstabber. I'm not like, he almost says I'm not a Kingslayer. But I'm not someone who would go and do these horrible things behind his own house's back. He signed an oath. Whether they have chosen the right decision or not in where they're going at the moment, like, I've still signed an oath. And it hints that he may be slightly more on board, but I don't think he's going to be fully on board. I think as soon as the battle turns sour, I think he will like bend the knee or maybe even fight against the Lannisters if he sees the battle going south. And at the same time, we see Cersei going into the crypts with Qyburn, who hasn't really done much since reanimating the Hound. He got Grand Maester Pycelle killed, if that helps. But yeah, his new invention. So he's gone and brought a man basically back from the dead to become the Mountain, to hype up Clegane Bowl. And what's he going to do next? He's going to make a rather large bow and arrow.
Okay, this is where
crossbow.
This is the big thing I wanted to talk about this episode. They were talking about the dragons, and he was saying like not completely invulnerable, and I joked, I said like, oh, what are they going to have? They're going to have like the black arrow and the wind lance from the Hobbit, and it turns out their plan is the wind lance and the black arrow from the Hobbit. I think can I go so far as to say it's plagiarism? Yeah, you know what, fuck it, I can. But then when I think about it, like, what other weapon would you have to face against a dragon?
I don't know. Just seeing the Mountain stepping up and punching the dragon in the face.
If you could like do an artist's rendering of that, that would be the most heavy metal album cover I think I'd ever see in my life.
Not the four White Walkers walking through the flames at Hold the Door episode of the last series.
Yeah.
Because that's
it is, yeah. But I saw this fucking wind lance, and I went straight to Desolation of Smorgon Back with the Five Armies because that was only a few years old.
Horrible Vietnamese flashbacks.
And I was thinking, like, what's the story going to be? That Drogon has got like a loose scale underneath the left wing, and the perfect shot fired from the wind lance is going to take him down.
I can't remember if it was said in the episode, or whether it was on the I love going through the Imgur Chris watches Game of Thrones on the Game of Thrones subreddit. Different Chris, by the way. He goes and types up funny versions of the episodes, and I think he actually made a reference to it. I think he said he was damaged in the fighting pits, but only the son of the person who damaged him is able to kill it because he can finish the job this time. I thought it was goddamn hilarious. But yeah, I mean, I thought that dragon skin was tougher than the bone. Maybe underneath. I would laugh if they tried firing it. It didn't even pierce the skin. And then he's just like, oh, fuck, and the dragon just eats him. That would be quite funny. But at the same time, we
need Luke Evans. We need Bard the Bowman in the series. Then he'll take all three dragons down, and the job will be done immediately.
Oh, God.
I'd like to see Luke Evans in the series. I think he'd be solid casting for this thing.
I still have flashbacks to High Rise from him, so I'm just going to leave that there.
We shall move swiftly on. That was one of the big things I wanted to talk about, because obviously I'm such a big fan of the Lord of the Rings. Not so much the Hobbit.
In the comments. Can we have him in as Gaston?
Just in character, as goes back to our Disney theory, right?
Can we have him just like, no one kills like Gaston, no one fucks like Gaston, no one slays a dragon like Gaston.
What else could we talk about with this? So you talked about the loyalty there. You talked about Cersei rallying everyone. I don't really have many thoughts on that. I will say it was nice to see Randall Tarly back, but one big thing, and Sheila did bring this up in the comments, something I didn't pick up on, and I just searched it up as Sheila did the comment. The guy playing, what's his name? Dickon. The son of Randall, was recast for this episode. So I can't remember the name of the original actor, but he was recast as the actor of Tom Hopper, sorry, who I haven't seen anything before. He's apparently a main role in the TV series Black Sails, which I know is the pirate TV show. He's done a lot of other things. He's been in Doctor Who, actually, in 2010. I didn't notice that casting change because the character was so minute in season 6, just at the dinner table. It wasn't like the whole oh god, what's his name, Dario. It wasn't like that thing where the entire appearance of him was different. But I just thought that was worth mentioning. I like that Randall, although he's a horrible character, he is still very much a loyal and principled character, and that's absolutely what Randall is. So the last place we need to talk about then is Old Town.
Yes.
I didn't talk about this with the whole Arya thing, but I guess I can talk about it now. This has probably my favorite scene transition in anything I've ever seen. It's disgusting, but it was a phenomenal transition nonetheless.
Are you talking about the scene transition where Grey Worm is about to fuck Missandei, and it cuts from him going from Missandei and then to what's it called? The person played by forgotten the name. Name of the person with Sam. Name of the person with Sam.
Oh, Jim Broadbent.
Jim Broadbent. Jim Broadbent picking up a book from the bookshelf.
I'm not talking about that one. No, I'm talking about the
because that was quite a swift cut. I like that.
It was. No, it was the very gruesome. And again, George prepped me for this. He said, "Don't watch this episode while you're eating something." I'm really glad I wasn't eating any kind of like shepherd's pie or anything like that, or apple crumble, whatever it happened to be, because that would have been absolutely disgusting. But yeah, we see the extent of Jorah's grayscale in this episode, and it is nasty. The makeup job was great on that. I thought, like, God knows how long he had to be in makeup for. I like how Sam was talking about his dad, and we see that connection there, which we knew anyway, but it was nice to hear Sam actually talking to the son of the Lord Commander. And this, you know, the surgery that he had to perform, no anesthetic, biting down, anything like that's always gruesome. Game of Thrones has done that before.
He just said, drink this rum, and then he had a very, very quick swig of it, and then he was just like, yeah, no, I'm going for this now, okay.
It's Sam completely out of his depth, but I like how, you know, he's surrounded by these curmudgeonly old white guys who don't want to help, and he's there to make a difference. That's why he went there. Maybe it's some kind of initiation thing. Maybe they're testing him, but it seems like they're, you know, men of principle, just doing whatever they do. I like that Sam's taking the upper hand here and he's really coming into his own, albeit this surgery was incredibly gruesome to watch. It was almost like watching a David Cronenberg, The Fly body horror kind of film.
Yeah.
Really gruesome to watch. And then as I said, the scene transition to the pie crust. Obviously it was meant you to think that it's still part of the grayscale, but when the camera panned out, I thought that, you know, usually a pie would look really tasty and stuff, but for some reason I've lost my appetite and I don't want anything like that forever now, because I'm always going to associate it with grayscale.
I think we're talking about it. I can't remember whether we were talking about this before the episode or after the whilst we were in the episode, but we were talking about what the actual cure was, and you were saying like no one's ever tried to just peel off the grayscale before, but I want to say the cure is, first of all, peeling off the grayscale, then you have to kind of cauterize the wound to like make sure it's burned off all the raw flesh and stuff like that, which may have been infected, get rid of all the pus and everything like that. Then herbs and remedies of some sort. Maybe it's going to be the salt and smoke that we're talking about. But at the same time, I feel like there is a cure featuring dragonglass, so dragonglass will be involved somewhere. Maybe this is a temporary cure until they can get him to dragonglass. So this will stop the infection, but the infection is still on him. So the skin will obviously harden again, but at least it'll take time to harden again until they can get him to Dragonstone, where he can have the true cure. If not, Sam's going to cure him. Then I think Sam's going to find the knowledge that he needs, because he's not going to be stuck there for the rest of the series. Let's be honest here. Maybe they're going to kick him out because of him going behind their backs and stuff like that. He's going to make a great escape. He's going to take the sword, sword which is made of Valyrian steel. Maybe he'll give it to Jorah, who's a much more skilled swordsman. And we'll have Jorah returning back to Dragonstone. Especially if Jon's going to be there.
Yeah, and it'll be an interesting situation when he does return after he has confessed his love for Daenerys. It seemed like a very...
He never sent the letter, I don't think. Or did he? Was he writing the letter when... I believe he was writing the letter when the cure was being administered.
So he was. He was. But I love Jorah. He's like my spirit animal. So I want to see him survive. I want to see him get back into the fight, and I'd like to see him get back to Daenerys. It seems like a very one-sided love story, though, and even when she seemed like she felt honoured by it and genuinely touched by it at the end of season 6, but I don't think it's going to be returned.
One of the deleted scenes from the episode where he gets banished by Daenerys actually shows how much she did miss kind of him. Stuff like that. I believe she says something like "never betray me" to Missandei when she's looking out across him leaving, and maybe that was because she truly did love him in some shape or form, not like the way that he wanted, but maybe more like a father figure of some sort, or someone she could trust, and that trust being lost her saying to Missandei, "Never betray me," is kind of like he betrayed me and I'm regretting it already, kind of dealio. So maybe the fact that like she has that kind of connection to him, he's always kind of been there for her, even though he has kind of betrayed her in the past. I still ship them together. God damn it!
Me too. Me too.
He's eternally in the friend zone. I want him to climb out. I want him to have the Dark Knight Rises climb music playing in the background whilst he climbs out of the friend zone.
Yes.
And it will be beautiful.
It will indeed. I want to put. We'll end on that then. So I want to put this question out.
Chris,
yes.
Did I just say the Dark Knight Rises and beautiful, and you said yes, indeed? Can we get a soundbite of that? People, can we please edit that into a soundbite? Because I want that.
You're getting the swift middle finger for that one, Tayton. We're going to end on that one then. I'm going to put this question out to our viewers. Get commenting with this one. Which couple in Game of Thrones do you ship the most? It can be an incestuous one. It can be a genuine one. It can be a beautiful one. It can be whatever relationship you want. It could be Gendry and his rowboat for all I care. But do let us know. I've said everything I can on this episode. Just to summarize, I thought it was a fantastic episode. It built on well from episode 1. A couple of the geographical jumps really did throw me off, but I like where this season's going so far. It's trimmed out all the fat, for better or worse. I would have liked a 10-episode series just because I get 3 more weeks of Game of Thrones, but it's moving at a good pace, and I'm looking forward to episode 3. So that'll do it. Oh, sorry, go on, Tate.
I was going to say, in quick summary, it doesn't have to have that much action for it to be a very good episode. And this was a very good episode.
Yes. Absolutely. So that'll do it for our review on episode 2, season 7 of Game of Thrones, Stormborn. Be sure to come back next Tuesday. We'll be going live again for episode 3, The Queen's Justice. I've just read the plot synopsis. Daenerys holds court, Cersei returns a gift, and Jaime learns from his mistakes. Great stuff happening for Game of Thrones. So that'll do it for us. Thank you to everyone that's joined us on the stream tonight and all the comments. It's been fantastic talking with you guys. Lots of stuff coming up on the channel. Look out right after this for a bunch of reaction videos that me and Tate have recorded for all the trailers that have come out at Comic-Con. This weekend, I believe we'll have a review out for Valyrian and the City of 1,000 Planets. So hit that subscribe button, like, comment, share, all that great stuff. Thank you to everyone. And until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.